Hey everybody, I'm Natasha Kirchuk, and thanks for joining us for ILTV's weekly program, One-on-One with Alan Dershowitz. We want to give you, our viewers, a chance to have your questions answered by Professor Dershowitz, one of America's greatest legal minds. He's a leading expert on criminal and constitutional law, civil liberties, and the Arab-Israeli conflict. Hi, Professor Dershowitz. It's so great to see you again.
Hey, it's great to be here from New Mexico.
Yes, you are across the country. Let's get started, Professor. I know that you're with some very special people. As you know, as always, we open our show with special guests. Today, our first guest is, in fact, a very special guest himself. Dr. Michael Miller from the Harvard Medical School and his wife are together with you, Professor, at the beautiful home of Tom and Joanna Ash in Albuquerque, New Mexico. So we wanted to allow Michael to throw out the first question. Michael, let's hear what you have to say.
Well, I'm going to ask a personal question of Alan. In a few days, you're going to be 78 and a half. And you are one of the most energetic people I know. People half your age don't have the energy you have. There's a concept we have, we call it FOMS, fear of missing something. Right. And you are emblematic of that. And we are always wondering how you keep your energy up. What is it that makes you so capable of just taking the greatest value of every day of your life?
Oh, well, thank you so much, Michael. Dr. Miller is one of the great psychiatrists in the United States, a forensic psychiatrist, does tremendous, tremendous work. So the question coming from you is very meaningful to me. I've always had a lot of passion and energy in my life from the time I was a kid, and I've always had FOMS. I never wanted to miss anything. When I was young, I couldn't decide what I wanted to be when I grew up. Did I want to be a lawyer? Did I want to be a professor? Did I want to be a public intellectual? Did I want to be a writer? So I became everything. I just love doing. And my energies are devoted these days largely to the defense of Israel. When I was growing up, my father taught me that as a Jew, you have to always defend the underdog. And as a young person, Israel wasn't the underdog. So I spent my life defending African Americans in civil rights, people on death row. And then after the 1970s, when Israel became the target of so much animosity, unjust animosity, I devoted my energy to Israel. So in the past week, I've done 3 op-eds about Israel. I'm going to do another one today. I just love trying to make a difference, and my commitment energizes me. So, you know, I also, as you know, because we're friends, you know, I enjoy walking in the woods and walking on the beach. And yesterday we drove around and saw some of the most beautiful sights in New Mexico. It's not that I just love to work. I love to be doing things. Even when I'm relaxing, I like to be relaxing in an energetic and positive way. Look, I'm going to be 80 in a year and a half. I don't know how long my energy will last, but I'm going to try to continue to work energetically as long as Hashem gives me the power and the energy to work in the interest of good things.
I'll say you're an inspiration to all of us who spend time with you. What I would say is that you have a lot of energy, but you have a very energetic brain. We often see Alan sitting, and he can be writing an op-ed piece while he's waiting for dinner at somebody's house. And the amount that you produce is an inspiration to us all. So
I hate to waste time.
Yes, you do.
Waste is a word that is just something that drives me crazy. So I like to use, look, we only have a certain amount of time on this earth, and I want to use every minute of it.
Well, that's a good approach. I think if more people follow that way of going, we'd all benefit from it. So
and you'd have more patience, probably. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks for having me, and it's nice to see you all.
Great. Thank you, Michael. All right. Well, I have to say you are a true inspiration to me yourself, and I don't think you've wasted a minute of your 80 years so far, so good for you. I can only hope I'll be in the same place at that age. All right, Professor, our next guest is Yadin Kaufman, who is the founding partner at Veritas Venture Partner, one of the leading U.S.-Israeli venture capital funds. As you can guess from the name of his company, Yadin received his training at Harvard, and today he's used his success to found Sadara Ventures, the first Middle East venture capital fund targeting investments in Palestinian technology companies. Let's hear from him.
Hi, Alan. It's great to reconnect. It's been a while since you were my law school professor and the faculty advisor of the Jewish Law Students Association at Harvard. And I remember taking a course with you and Erwin Kotler on human rights. And you taught us about some of the big issues facing the world and also how to take practical steps to address some of those issues. And I've tried to incorporate that into some of the work I've done over the years here. As you know, I've been in the venture capital business in Israel for many years, building high-tech companies, and also started a fund that's investing in Palestinian entrepreneurs who have great talent and I think is very important for the whole region that they succeed. And I also started a nonprofit here in Israel called Tmura that tries to share some of the high-tech wealth with less fortunate elements of Israeli society. We get companies to donate options. For example, the company Waze gave us some options while they were still a small company, and those options turned into $1.5 million, which then went to support 5 terrific Israeli nonprofits. What I'd like to ask you about today is something that happened just last week and that I think can have far-reaching impact on Israeli society in the legal sphere, but also beyond. As you know, 4 new justices were appointed to the Supreme Court here. And a question that I have and a concern that I have is that this ties into efforts to restrict the ability of the judiciary to maintain civil rights here in Israel. And as you know, much of the work on this was done by a fantastic jurist, Alan Dershowitz, for whom I clerked, thanks to your introduction again. And I'm curious as to how you see the future of civil rights in Israel, given these new developments and new appointments. Thanks.
Yadin, it is such a pleasure to see you and to see you so successful. I remember so well when I met you when you were a first-year law student, and I immediately saw in you enormous leadership ability. You were one of the founders of the Harvard Jewish Law Students Association. I was the faculty advisor. As you said, you were my student in that very interesting course I taught with Erwin Kotler. But I immediately saw that you were going to be a leader. And I think what you're doing now in helping to bring Israeli and Palestinian investors together is so fantastic. The future of the region has to lie in economic cooperation. And as you said, there are such amazingly innovative people among Palestinians that we have to work together. Just one more point. I was commending on Al Jazeera television the other day the fact that Muslim leaders in the United States have contributed to helping clean up the desecrated cemeteries in St. Louis and Philadelphia, where people have knocked over Jewish gravestones. Jews and Muslims, Israelis and Palestinians have to work together. The peace dividend will be enormous. Now to your question about the Supreme Court. It's a fascinating and interesting question. There is an inevitable rule that operates in every country. When the judicial system of a country only operates abstractly and only deals with abstract issues, the public doesn't care. So for the first many, many years of American history, the public didn't care who was on the Supreme Court. In Britain, the public doesn't care who was on the courts. And in Israel, for many years, when I first started working with Israeli justices, Israelis didn't care. They didn't even know the names of justices. But as Supreme Courts become more involved in the day-to-day lives of its citizens, whether it be in the United States in cases like Roe versus Wade, a woman's right to choose abortion or gay marriage, or in England, cases like the Brexit case that were recently decided, or in Israel, where the Israeli Supreme Court has so much influence on the daily lives of people, it's inevitable in a democracy that the people will want to have more of an influence in how judges are selected. So the conflict that we now have in Israel between the professionals, the committee, which consists traditionally of a majority of professionals, justices of the Supreme Court and members of the bar, and only a minority of politicians, is being challenged. And the recent compromise that was reached is a reflection of that. Nobody should be surprised. That doesn't mean we shouldn't continue to fight for objectivity and independence and the rule of law, and to try to make sure that justices of the Supreme Court maintain the tradition of Aaron Barak and Dorit Beinish and others who have been great contributors to the rule of law. But don't expect the public not to become interested in the processes and the results of the processes by which justices are picked. It is an inevitable consequence of the Supreme Court becoming more involved in the day-to-day lives of the average person in a democracy.
All right, Professor, thanks for the response. Turning to our next question, Derora Trop hails from New Jersey, and she, like the rest of us, have followed your concern regarding the future leadership of the DNC. Let's hear what she has to say.
Hi, Professor Dershowitz. My name is Derora, originally from New Jersey. I wanted to ask you a question about the Democratic National Committee. I know that you're pleased that Ellison didn't get the top prize as the head of the party, but would be curious to hear about how you feel about him getting the consolation prize. I would further like to hear how you continue to plan being involved in the party and fighting for the soul of the Democratic Party.
A great question, Derora. Look, it's a very daunting problem, and it's going to get worse, not better. Many young radicals within the Democratic Party, many of whom did not vote for Hillary Clinton, many of whom voted for Jill Stein, for the Libertarian candidate, and some of whom voted even for Trump, thinking the revolution will come quicker if Trump is elected. But many of the young radicals are trying to turn the Democratic Party into the British Labour Party. The British Labour Party is now a fringe party. It couldn't get its head, Jeremy Corbyn, elected dog catcher because he's too far left. He's very anti-Israel, and he has tolerated the anti-Semitism of the hard left that's become, unfortunately, far too common in Europe and in parts of the United States. So we have to fight that battle. I decided to fight it over Keith Ellison, because Keith Ellison has a history of anti-Semitism, and let nobody doubt that. He played footsie and worked hand in hand with one of the most publicly notorious anti-Semites in American history, the Reverend Louis Farrakhan. And Farrakhan never tried to hide his anti-Semitism. He called Judaism a gutter religion. He claimed that Jews were primarily responsible for the African slave trade. He said terrible, terrible things about Israel and about Jewish people. And Ellison has lied about that. He's either lied or he's the dumbest man on the face of the earth, because he has said he didn't realize that Farrakhan was an anti-Semite or had expressed anti-Semitic views when he worked with him. Well, everybody else in the world knew Farrakhan was an anti-Semite. Farrakhan himself never denied it. And so for Ellison to look me in the eye and say he didn't know that Farrakhan was an anti-Semite simply is not credible. And I simply don't believe him. I think he's not telling the truth. And I think that disqualified him from any leadership. He also voted against funding for the Iron Dome. How do you vote against funding for the Iron Dome, which is a missile system that protects children and women and civilians from terrorist attacks from Gaza and in the future potentially from Lebanon and other places? So for me, Ellison was the symbol, and I worked very hard to make sure he lost the election. And I have been told that my op-eds and other phone calls and others may have had something of an influence on at least some of the voters. But he was named deputy chairman, and we're going to watch and see. We're going to see if he becomes, quote, the face of the Democratic Party, as Thomas Perez says he would. And if that happens, I will reconsider my active membership in the Democratic Party. But in the meantime, I'm going to fight from within. We have won 2 battles in a row. We won the battle against the Sanders forces to try to change the Democratic platform. It was a close vote, but we won. And we won the Ellison battle. So as long as we're winning, I'm going to remain within the Democratic Party. I want to see the Democratic Party remain pro-Israel. I want to see Israel remain a bipartisan issue. And I'm not going to give up. I'm certainly not going to give up in the face of victory.
All right, Professor, our next guest is Rabbi Andy Sachs. Rav Andy is the head of the Rabbinical Assembly of the Masorti Conservative Movement in Israel, and he's up in arms about the future of egalitarian prayer at the Western Wall in Jerusalem and the right of all Jews to pray or daven at the holy site in their own way.
Hello, Professor Dershowitz. I want to thank you for your help with regard to bringing over those Jews from Uganda and Venezuela. The Uganda Jews have arrived and they're studying at the conservative yeshiva, and the Venezuelans are due to arrive in just a few weeks. I'm sure you know that there was a compromise made after the riots in 1999 to allow for egalitarian davening at the southern section of the Kotel known as Rabbat Zinzarch or Ezrat Yisrael. There's also a continued struggle of women of the wall, and the major group has agreed to daven in that egalitarian area. There was also an agreement reached between the government and those other parties, the Reform Movement, the Conservative Movement, Women of the Wall, and others, that there be a permanent section, Ezrat Yisrael, for those who choose egalitarian davening or to daven in keeping with their own customs. And yet that agreement has not been applied. Yesterday, in a surprising attack of aggressiveness, the former chief rabbi of Israel, Rav Amar, came with his minions and set up a machitza in the one area where a machitza is not acceptable, and took it over with a group of yeshiva students, thus preventing those who believe in an egalitarian approach from davening in keeping with their custom. I would like to know your view on how such things should be handled. Pirkei Avot, Ethics of the Father, tells us that the person who says what's mine is mine and what's yours is mine is considered to be a rasha, an evil person. How do you react to the actions of those who feel that not only should the traditional section of the Kotel be in keeping with Orthodox tradition, but so too the egalitarian section set up for others? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Saxon. Thank you for your great work on behalf of all Jews around the world. Look, Judaism is too important to be left to the rabbis, and it's certainly too important to be left to one small group of rabbis. Judaism belongs to all of us, and the rule of law belongs to all of us. And what the rabbis did to the women of the wall is a crime, is illegal, and they should be arrested and prosecuted for that. Now, I'm biased here. My wife and daughter are members of Women of the Wall. We have the little tambourine that we proudly display. And when we go to Israel, we daven at the egalitarian part of the Kotel. That should be something that's available to all of us. The most important thing is the rule of law has to be obeyed. And the rule of law has set aside a portion of the Kotel for egalitarian prayer. Orthodox Jews have the right to pray in their own space. I would never try to interfere with that, nor would I try to take away the main part of the Kotel from Orthodox Jews, although that's obviously subject to controversy and dispute. But surely setting aside one small portion of the wall for egalitarian service of the kind that I participate in, many very good Jews participate in, is very important. And the courts have to enforce these rules. And, you know, it's an act of civil disobedience when Haredi Jews or other Jews try to prevent the law from being carried out, and they just can't be allowed to do that. If they want to engage in civil disobedience, then they have to take the consequences of that, which means going to prison and serving their time. But the rule of law has to be obeyed, and the police have to enforce the rule of law to allow people of every stripe of Judaism to participate in prayer services. What good does it do to turn people off from Judaism, from prayer? If you're an Orthodox Jew, don't you want people to participate in prayer even on their own terms? It just makes no sense to me to think that one group of Jews has a monopoly on the way Judaism is practiced, where Judaism is practiced, and how Judaism is practiced. So let's work together to allow Jews to practice Judaism in any way they choose to. And let's remember, Judaism has changed so much over the centuries. Yes, it has had a stable force as well, but it has changed in response to changing realities. And the changing reality today is women are playing a much more important role than ever in promoting Judaism, and that's a very, very good thing.
All right, Professor, we're now at our last question. This one comes from Dr. Gil Orion, yet another lawyer. He's a partner at Fisher Becher Chen Well Orion & Co., Israel's fourth largest law firm. And I think that we can all agree that the issue on his mind is one that is bothering all of us.
Alan, shalom. I'm Dr. Gil Orion, a partner and the head of the litigation department at Fisher Becher Chen Well Orion, one of the leading law firms in Tel Aviv. I earned my doctorate at Harvard Law School in 1996. We would have loved to see you at our first ever Harvard Law School Association alumni event in Israel. Gathered here are Harvard Law alumni from Israel and abroad, and we would appreciate your thoughts on the one-state, two-state solution. Thank you, and looking forward to seeing you at your next visit to Israel. Bye.
Well, thank you so much, and it would be great to come to Israel to help celebrate Harvard's presence in Israel. We're very proud of our Israeli students, many of whom are not only prominent lawyers in Israel, but prominent judges and justices and political figures. So the Harvard connection to Israel is a very close one. I actually came to Harvard as a professor as the result of being invited to participate initially back in 1962 in a Harvard-Israeli program. That didn't work out then, but the Harvard invitation to teach there did work out. Look, there is no one-state solution. There is only a one-state problem. The only solution is a two-state solution. Yes, I've read all the arguments about, well, we can have one state and the Palestinians will have these rights but not those rights, and maybe they'll be like Puerto Rico rather than like the United States or like Washington, D.C. It's all nonsense. There is no one-state solution that is possible for Israel. The only solution is a two-state solution. How the two-state solution works, that's subject to dispute and controversy. I agree with the Prime Minister of Israel that the Palestinian state has to be a state minus. It has to be a state minus an air force. It has to be a state minus tanks and rockets. It has to be a state that will have as its security border protection by Israel against ISIS and other forces that would endanger Israel. But beyond that, a two-state solution is completely viable. And those who say that the settlements make a two-state solution no longer viable are simply wrong. You have to just look at the map and see that the vast majority of the West Bank is subject to being made part of a Palestinian state. Land swaps can be arranged. The two-state solution is alive, well, viable. Anybody who says it's dead has an ideological bias. Anybody who says that it's impossible to have a two-state solution has that same ideological bias. There is no solution other than a two-state solution. And I hope the Palestinians will understand that quickly. The Israeli leadership will understand that and will move toward a two-state solution. I have favored the two-state solution since I debated Noam Chomsky in 1970 when he favored a one-state solution. He said, look at the wonderful model of Lebanon, a one-state solution. Look what happened to Lebanon. He said, look at Yugoslavia. Look what's happening in Yugoslavia. When it comes to states, a good divorce is better than a bad marriage. And Israel and the Palestinians need a divorce. They need a separation. They need a separation, hopefully, in which people like Yadin Kaufman can work to bring together the economies and can work together for technology. But politically, there has to be a separation. It's viable, it's doable, and it should happen sooner rather than later. And the responsibility for it not happening has to clearly be in the hands of the Palestinians, who turned down a two-state solution in 2001, who turned down a two-state solution in 2008, and who continue to refuse to sit down and accept Prime Minister Netanyahu's invitation to negotiate a two-state solution with no preconditions. So the blame should be put squarely where it belongs, on the Palestinian Authority for refusing to negotiate a two-state solution. That has to be the first step. And I would hope that the new American administration will put pressure on the Palestinians to come to the bargaining table. The Palestinians must earn their right to statehood. And earning their right to statehood entails sitting down at the negotiating table, making the kinds of painful compromises both sides will have to make to bring about a solution to this problem that has existed far too long. But there is no one-state solution.
Well put, Professor. All right, that's unfortunately all the time that we have for today. Thanks for your time. I also want to thank all of our guests. If you'd like Professor Dershowitz to answer your questions, go to iltv.tv or our Facebook page and submit them. We'll see you again next week. Enjoy New Mexico.
Thank you so much. We will.